You were taught there is one correct path in life. A path that minimizes risk and avoids unnecessary volatility. A path that looks stable over a long-term time horizon. You were told to get the right education first. Then find stable work and stay consistent over time. Progress slowly and let compounding do its job quietly. You were reassured that this path reduces uncertainty. Fewer risks, fewer drawdowns, fewer unexpected changes. Everything feels controlled, almost predictable. And it feels right because everyone else is doing it. The same timeline, the same milestones, the same expectations. When everyone follows it, it starts to feel like the only rational choice. But this video asks a different question. What if the definition of safe has quietly changed over time? And what used to feel stable now carries a different kind of risk? The safe path always sounded simple. Just follow the steps in front of you without questioning them. Stay inside the lines and reduce perceived risk over time. Graduate, get a job, and start building a career. That sequence became the default life model. It promised stability over a long-term time horizon. Slow progress was seen as responsible and rational. You were told compounding would reward patience eventually. So you stayed consistent and avoided volatility. And for a while, it actually worked. The system rewarded consistency and predictability. The logic felt stable and made sense. The problem is the system quietly changed. The pace accelerated beyond what most expected, and the risk landscape became harder to read. Jobs are no longer as stable as before. Industries move faster, creating more volatility. Skills lose value quicker than expected. But most people are still following the same path. The model hasn't adapted to the new environment. The time horizon assumptions are outdated, and that is where the real risk begins. Not from action, but from staying unchanged. Because the biggest drawdown often comes from outdated assumptions. The safer the path looks, the narrower it usually becomes over time. You follow the rules, avoid risk, and stay consistent. But slowly your options begin to shrink without you noticing. Your skills become highly specific to one system. That makes you efficient, but also dependent. When change comes, the adjustment feels larger than expected. Stability feels comfortable in the short term. Income is predictable, routines are clear. But flexibility quietly disappears from your long-term equation. Systems change faster than most people expect. Industries shift, tools evolve, and roles disappear. If you're locked into one path, adaptation takes more time. You didn't design the system yourself. You followed what was considered safe and responsible. Most people did the exact same thing. The outcome is not immediate, but it compounds over time. Limited options increase your exposure to risk. And that risk often stays invisible until later. This is not about effort or discipline. You can work hard and still feel stuck. Because the structure itself limits your range of movement. The real risk is not always visible in the moment. It builds quietly across your time horizon. And by the time you notice, options are already limited. The safe path looks like a smart way to reduce risk. It promises stability across your time horizon and fewer unexpected drawdowns. But it quietly trades away flexibility you might need later. The problem is the world no longer rewards predictability. Volatility has become part of everyday life, not an exception. And long-term plans now face constant uncertainty. The people who adapt tend to survive longer cycles. Not the most organized, but the most responsive to change. Speed of adjustment now matters more than perfection. The safe path was never designed for rapid change. It assumes a stable system with predictable outcomes. And that assumption no longer holds. It was built to minimize risk, not to handle volatility. Stability was the goal, not growth through change. Compounding in this path is often limited. In today's system, that becomes a hidden weakness. What feels safe can reduce your ability to respond, and over time that gap compounds. The system that once protected you now quietly limits you. It reduces exposure to risk, but also to opportunity. And most people don't notice the trade-off. The result is a quiet feeling of being stuck. You keep moving, but progress feels limited. And over the long term, that becomes frustrating. You feel safe right now. Everything seems stable and predictable. Nothing looks like a real risk yet. But that sense of safety depends on one assumption: that your environment will not change, that your time horizon stays predictable. And when something shifts, the system breaks for you. You were never trained for volatility. So the first shock feels bigger than it is. You are not used to switching paths, not used to trying uncertain options, not used to failing and recovering. Because the safe path filters all of that out. It removes risk, but also removes learning. It keeps drawdown low, but growth limited. Over time, that creates a gap. You have stability, but no adaptability. When conditions change, you lack response options. Adaptation is now a core skill. The system rewards flexibility over routine. Long-term survival depends on it. And this is where the real risk sits, not in volatility itself, but in being unprepared for it. You were told to choose a safe path early, something stable, predictable, and low risk. But safe often just means limited upside over a long time horizon. A flexible path behaves differently. It adjusts when conditions change. It accepts volatility instead of avoiding it completely. Flexibility creates options over time. Options reduce the impact of a single wrong decision, and that matters more than chasing certainty. This kind of path feels uncomfortable. It is not always clear or structured. Sometimes it looks like you're falling behind. But this is closer to reality. Systems today are unstable and constantly shifting. Stability is often just temporary control over drawdown. You cannot control the system itself. You cannot eliminate risk entirely, but you can adjust your direction within it. Direction compounds over time. Small adjustments create long-term outcomes, more than any fixed plan ever could. Because direction can always adapt, it evolves with your time horizon. A fixed path cannot do that. You were told to stay on one safe path. It feels stable and predictable over time. But stability can hide unseen risk. That path is not always the best choice. Different conditions change the outcome over time. What worked before may not work long-term. You can stay on your current path, but you can also build flexibility alongside it. That changes your time horizon. Skills that transfer reduce your risk exposure. Extra income creates small buffers. Options quietly build resilience over time. This is not about replacing everything. It is about creating space for change. Space reduces pressure during volatility. The real issue is not the path itself. It is dependence on only one system. That concentration increases downside risk. That is where the danger sits quietly. Systems change faster than expected. Volatility does not send warnings. One small shift can affect everything. Income, stability, and long-term plans move together. That is the math most people ignore. Playing it safe is not always wrong. It reduces volatility and protects your time horizon. But safety alone does not create long-term progress. If you only have one path, it feels stable at first, but concentration increases risk over time. One option means no buffer against change. Without alternatives, decisions become forced. Your flexibility disappears under pressure, and your margin for error gets smaller. Life feels heavy not because of effort. It feels heavy because of limited choices. A narrow system increases emotional and financial drawdown. What makes life lighter is not certainty. It is optionality over time. More options reduce risk exposure and improve outcomes. The ability to choose changes everything. You can adjust to volatility instead of absorbing it. You gain control over your direction. This does not come from a single path. It comes from multiple small bets over time. Compounding works best with flexibility, and those options are not given. They are built slowly through decisions. You create your own margin over time. You were not wrong for choosing the safe path. It made sense given your risk tolerance and limited time horizon back then. Stability used to mean survival, not optimization. But the system around you has quietly shifted. What used to feel low risk now carries hidden volatility. Even the definition of safe has been recalculated over time. If you keep using the same strategy, progress starts to stall. The effort stays high, but the return feels flat over the long term. It creates a quiet sense of being stuck without a clear cause. The adjustment is not dramatic, but it matters. Expanding your options reduces dependency on a single income path. Over time, flexibility compounds more than rigidity. Safety is no longer about staying on one path. It is about maintaining the ability to keep moving through uncertainty. The real advantage is adaptability over time.